Parents betrayed me for my brother and erased me from their $2 company while I struggled. But I built my own empire from nothing and they came begging. Delete her access by Friday. She's becoming a problem. The words blurred on my screen as my coffee cup slipped from my hand, shattering against my office floor at 2 a.m. I wasn't supposed to see this email from my father to our company lawyer. But there it was, the proof that my family was systematically pushing me out of our business because I was too ambitious for a daughter. I'm Chen, first-generation American with immigrant parents who started a food business from our garage when I was just 10. I watched them build it from nothing, helped translate their broken English into business contracts as a teenager, and eventually graduated top of my class with an MBA from Wharton specifically to help grow our family company. I've sacrificed dating, friendships, even passed up on a 6-figure consulting job in New York, all for the dream of taking our family legacy to the next level. 7 years of 80-hour weeks building our family food company into a $2 million brand, and this was my reward. My MBA gathering dust while my brother Mark, who couldn't tell quinoa from couscous and hadn't completed a single project deadline, was being groomed to replace me, all because he was the son. That night in the empty office, something broke inside me that could never be fixed. But something else was born too, a determination that would change everything. My father always said business isn't personal. He was wrong. In family business, it's always personal. And the decision they made that night would cost them everything they built over 3 decades. This is the story of how I was betrayed by my family, built something from nothing, and then faced the ultimate choice when they came crawling back 18 months later as their empire crumbled. If you've ever been the family underdog, the overlooked child, or the one who tries too hard, I promise, what happened next will leave you speechless. Looking back, I should have seen the signs sooner. What started as subtle comments about women in business gradually became a calculated campaign to push me out. My story isn't just about family betrayal, it's about what happens when the American dream collides with old-world prejudice, and how that collision almost destroyed everything my parents built. The clues were everywhere. When our annual company photo was taken, they positioned me in the back, barely visible. When media interviewed our leadership, my name was mysteriously left off the list. My office was relocated 3 times in 6 months, each space smaller than the last, until I ended up in what was essentially a converted supply closet. The Boston deal is closing tomorrow, I announced in our March meeting last year, after 6 months negotiating our biggest ever restaurant contract. I just need Dad's signature. My father barely looked up from his phone. Mark will handle it, you're off the project. The room went silent. Months of work, dozens of red-eye flights, hundreds of emails and calls, all transferred to my brother with a casual sentence. Mark smirked across the table, his golf tan fresh from the client meetings he'd skipped the previous week. But they specifically asked for me, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. My father's response cut through me. Michelle, you're too emotional about this business. Clients respect Mark's leadership style more. Translation: men prefer dealing with other men. Later that week, I discovered my corporate email had been silently set to forward to my mother, the company's HR director. When confronted, she patted my hand. Honey, we're just protecting you. Focusing so much on career isn't healthy for a woman your age. Your biological clock. I cut her off. I'm the VP of marketing. I built our brand from nothing. She smiled that placating smile I'd grown to hate. And we're all very impressed, dear, but it's time to think about balance. The final straw came when my newly printed business cards arrived. Instead of Vice President Marketing, they read Family Relations Coordinator, a position that didn't exist. When I demanded answers, I was told, "We thought you'd be happier with less pressure." That night, working late as usual, I found the email thread that confirmed everything. Subject line: Transition Plan, Removing Michelle from Operations. The message from my father was brutally clear. Our daughter is too assertive for this role. Mark will be easier to guide. We need to remove Michelle before she gains more influence with the board. My mother's response was somehow worse. Michelle is too much like me before I understood a woman's place. We're doing her a favor. The next morning, I walked into our executive meeting, placed the printed emails on the table, and asked one question. Why am I not good enough for our family company? The silence was deafening. My father's face flushed. My mother's eyes welled with tears. Mark studied his expensive shoes. Finally, my father cleared his throat. This is our company, Michelle. We've chosen Mark. If you can't accept that, there's the door. Not a word of denial. Not one attempt to explain. Just cold confirmation that my worst fears were true. I walked out with a single box of belongings and the market research I'd personally developed. Through the glass conference room, I could see them already continuing their meeting. 18 years of family dinners, holidays, and shared memories erased in an instant. No one called me for 2 weeks. It was the most painful day of my life. But sometimes, rock bottom becomes the solid foundation on which you rebuild everything. As I drove away from the only dream I'd ever had, something inside me whispered, "Watch me now." 2 days after being erased from my family's legacy, my phone rang. I almost ignored it, still numb from what had happened, but something made me answer. "Michelle Chen, this is Linda Zhao, CEO of Authentic Flavors," said the voice on the other end. "Our biggest competitor." "We've been watching your marketing campaigns for years," she continued. "Your Midwest expansion strategy was brilliant. We want you to build a new consumer division for us, triple your current salary, full creative control, corner office." The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter my parents deemed unsuitable for leadership was being headhunted by their biggest rival. Part of me wanted to accept immediately, to prove my parents wrong in the most painful way possible. But something didn't feel right. I paced my apartment all night, torn between vindication and guilt. My mentor, my former business professor, met me for coffee the next day. "Michelle, loyalty to people who aren't loyal to you is self-sabotage," he said, stirring his Americano thoughtfully. "But this isn't just about your family or their competitor. This is about you. What would you do if your family wasn't in the equation at all?" His question hit me like lightning. I wasn't just reacting to rejection. I was at a crossroads of my entire career. What did I really want? The American dream isn't just about following someone else's path. It's about creating your own. I called Linda and declined her offer. "I'm not going to work for a competitor," I told her. "I'm going to become one." The next few months were a crash course in American entrepreneurship. I sold my car, emptied my savings account, and moved to a studio apartment where I could hear neighbors arguing through paper-thin walls. I lived on ramen and coffee, working 20-hour days building my business plan. My parents had started with nothing as immigrants. Now I was doing the same, by choice. 5 banks rejected my loan applications despite my perfect credit score. The last banker leaned forward with a smirk. "If your family doesn't trust you with their business, why should we trust you with our money?" Then came the devastating blow. My father had called our major suppliers, telling them not to work with me if they valued their contracts with his company. Doors slammed shut before I could even knock. I was being blackballed by my own family. That night was my lowest point. Lying on my apartment floor, sobbing until my throat was raw, I seriously questioned everything. Was I throwing away my career out of pride? Was I delusional? The American dream sometimes feels more like a nightmare when you're living on credit card debt and frozen meals. At 4 a.m., staring at my ceiling, clarity finally came. I didn't need to compete directly with my family's high-end restaurant supply business. I could target the market they'd always dismissed, direct-to-consumer organic foods, the very market I had begged them to enter for years. I remembered my father scoffing, Regular Americans don't care about organic. They want cheap and convenient. But my market research showed otherwise. Consumers increasingly valued transparency, sustainability, and connection to their food sources. This was the future my parents couldn't see. With my last $5,000, I developed 3 products in a rented commercial kitchen during overnight hours when rates were cheaper. I created packaging that told not just the product story, but my story, of betting on myself when no one else would. And I explicitly branded the company as woman-founded and operated, turning my family's bias into a marketing strength. My first breakthrough came when a small regional grocer in Portland agreed to stock my products in 7 stores. I personally delivered every case, staying to talk with customers about the products. People didn't just like the food, they connected with the mission. One woman hugged me after hearing my story, saying, "This is what America is supposed to be about, people who won't take no for an answer." 8 grueling months later, after countless setbacks and near bankruptcy, Whole Foods picked up my product line for 37 stores nationwide, more than double what my family's company had achieved in 30 years. The buyer told me, "Your products have a soul. Customers aren't just buying food, they're buying your resilience." When Forbes published a feature on the woman revolutionizing family food business with my photo on the cover, I stood in the grocery checkout line staring at my own face, tears streaming down my cheeks. The cashier thought I was crying because I was in a magazine. The truth was more complicated. I was mourning the fact that my biggest achievement wasn't being celebrated by the people whose approval I'd sought my entire life. That evening, I received a text from my mother. "Congratulations, your father saw the article." No apology, no acknowledgement, just a cold recognition of my existence. By then, I had secured $1.2 million in venture funding, hired an all-female executive team, each with her own story of workplace discrimination, and expanded to 142 stores in 3 states. My products were winning industry awards for innovation, while my brother's leadership was driving our family business into the ground. But I had no idea how completely until my phone rang at 11 p.m., 18 months after I'd walked out their door. The call that would force me to choose between revenge and redemption. "Michelle, we're losing everything." Mark's voice cracked on the other end of the line. "The company will be bankrupt in 30 days without a miracle." I sat in stunned silence, watching rain streak down my window as my brother, who had watched me be pushed out without saying a word, begged for my help. The empire my parents had built over 30 years, the company they had deemed me unworthy to lead, was now on the verge of collapse. Part of me wanted to say, "I told you so," and hang up. That would have been the easy response, and perhaps the one most people would understand. But family is complicated. Even through the pain, these were still the people who had taught me entrepreneurship, who had shown me what building something from nothing looked like. "Tell me everything," I said instead. The story he told was a textbook case of mismanagement. Mark had spent $300,000 renovating the office with imported furniture while the production line desperately needed updates. He'd fired 4 veteran employees for questioning his vision, losing decades of client relationships overnight. Quality control collapsed, costs soared, and 3 major restaurant chains canceled their contracts. "Does Dad know you're calling me?" I asked. Mark's silence was answer enough. He was reaching out behind our parents' backs, a desperate move from someone who had run out of options. "I'll think about it," I said before hanging up. I barely slept that night. Would helping them be self-betrayal? Would refusing make me as cold as they had been to me? The American success story so often celebrates individual triumph, but at what cost to the connections that made you who you are? The next morning, my father called. His voice, once commanding and confident, now sounded old and defeated. "Your brother shouldn't have called you, but he's right. We need you, Michelle. Can you come to the office tomorrow?" Walking into my family's building the following day felt like entering a time capsule. The logo I'd designed still hung in the lobby. The mission statement I'd crafted still adorned the wall, But everything else had changed. The vibrant energy was gone, replaced by a quiet tension. Employees averted their eyes as I passed, as if I were a ghost returning to haunt them. The conference room where I'd once been dismissed now felt smaller, less intimidating. My success had changed my perspective. What once seemed like an impenetrable fortress was now just a room with a table and some chairs. My father looked a decade older, with deep lines around his eyes I'd never noticed before. My mother couldn't meet my gaze. Mark hunched in his chair, a shell of his former arrogant self. My father pushed a document across the table with shaking hands, an offer to sell me 70% of the company at a fraction of its worth, with full control as CEO. "I was wrong, Michelle," he said, his voice breaking. "I chose the wrong person. You should have been running this company all along." For the first time in my life, I saw my father cry, this proud immigrant man who had fled communist China with nothing but his determination. My mother gripped my hand. "We hurt you because of our stupid prejudice. We've lost everything that matters, your trust, your presence in our lives, and now the business too." Mark looked up. "Do you hate me?" Looking at my brother, really seeing him, I realized he wasn't just my rival, but another victim of our parents' rigid expectations. The golden child often carries a burden just as heavy as the scapegoats, the impossible pressure of being chosen. "No," I answered honestly. "I'm just disappointed that no one in this room believed in me when it mattered." I studied the contract, feeling the weight of the moment. I could take their company, the very one that had rejected me. I could fire my brother as I had been fired. The revenge fantasy I'd nursed in my darkest moments was now within reach. Instead, I tore the contract in half. The ripping sound echoed in the silent room. 3 shocked faces stared back at me. "I won't buy your company," I said firmly, "but I'll merge our businesses on one condition." I opened my laptop and displayed my proposal. "Mark and I will lead together. He'll handle customer relations where he excels. I'll run operations and strategy. And the new board will include 50% women." My father started to object, then stopped himself. Looking at the ruins of his once proud company, he simply nodded. "Whatever you think is best." As we worked through initial details, my father suddenly circled the table and embraced me, something he hadn't done since I was a child. "Michelle," he whispered in his accented English, "I'm proud of you. Not for your success, but for your character." In that moment, I understood something profound about the American dream, about family, and about forgiveness. It isn't about forgetting the wound. It's about refusing to let it determine your future. Sometimes the most powerful form of success isn't proving people wrong, it's showing them a better way forward. The merger wasn't just about combining 2 companies, it was about healing a fractured family and creating something new from the broken pieces. But like any major transformation, it didn't happen overnight or without resistance. The first joint staff meeting felt like a diplomatic summit between hostile nations. Employees clustered in opposing corners, loyalty lines clearly drawn. I overheard one longtime employee mutter, "Now we have to answer to the princess who ran away." My new team eyed the family company staff with suspicion, wondering if they shared my parents' biases. It took 6 months of restructuring, difficult conversations, and several strategic departures before the new culture began to take hold. Mark and I established weekly honest hours where we could address conflicts privately before they affected the company. We were rebuilding not just a business, but a relationship that had been poisoned by competition. After one particularly challenging negotiation with a difficult supplier, Mark confessed something that stunned me. "I never actually wanted to run the company. Dad just assumed I did because I was the son." Eyes fixed on the floor, he added, "I was terrified of disappointing him. Then I was terrified to admit I wasn't like you. I don't have your vision or drive. I wanted to be a chef, not a CEO." That conversation began a genuine healing between us. I started seeing my brother not as the favored child who took what was mine, but as another victim of our parents' rigid expectations, trapped in a role he never chose. The American dream means freedom to choose your path, but sometimes immigrant parents, in their desire to provide security, forget that part. Today, 2 years later, our merged company has increased revenue by 215%. We've expanded to 5 states, and our signature Family Blend product line, named as a symbol of our reunited family, has won national recognition for innovation. Mark now heads our culinary innovation team, the role he always wanted, where his creativity shines. I handle the business strategy, where my strengths are best utilized. The most remarkable transformation has been my parents. My father sold his beloved golf club membership to fund a scholarship for women entrepreneurs with immigrant backgrounds. My mother leads a support group for family businesses navigating succession planning. At a recent industry conference, my father openly shared, "I nearly destroyed everything because I couldn't see past my daughter's gender to her exceptional abilities. Don't make my mistake." The lessons I've learned run deeper than any business school could teach. Favoritism in families doesn't just hurt feelings, it destroys potential and squanders assets. Parents who can't see past their biases don't just damage relationships, they make objectively poor business decisions. The American dream isn't just about individual success, it's about creating systems where everyone can contribute their best. Sometimes, for your family to truly see your value, you must build your own path first. The hardest part wasn't creating my company, it was finding the courage to believe in myself when the people who should have believed in me most didn't. And that's a challenge many Americans face, whether they're from immigrant families or not, the courage to define success on your own terms. For anyone facing family favoritism or discrimination, your pain is real, but don't let it define you. Let it drive you. The qualities that your family undervalues may be precisely your greatest strengths in the right context. America was built by people who weren't appreciated in their original environments, but found places where their unique qualities could shine. There's a unique power in being underestimated, a resilience that the favored child never develops. Your struggle, painful as it is, may be forging exactly the character and skills you need for extraordinary success. Remember, family favoritism may take away your opportunities, but only you can decide whether it will destroy you or create a stronger version of yourself. The choice was mine. The choice is yours. I'm Chen, and this is my true story. If you've been underestimated or overlooked by your family, share your experience in the comments with "Rise Up." Tag someone who needs to hear this message and let them know they're not alone. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening. Your greatest chapter may be just beginning.